tell people why you deserve to be elected to the Board of Finance.
Sure. Well, I mean, as I think about why I'm running for reelection, I'm currently in my first 4-year term. I've been serving as chairman of the Board of Finance for 2 years. To me, it starts with the fact that I'm from Wilton originally, and I want to give back to the community that raised me. I went to high school here. I grew up here, and I've my wife and I had the privilege of being able to move back here a few years ago. And I'm very proud of Wilton. And a lot of that's because of the volunteering and the service that generations before me put in. And I want to give back in the same way that they did. Second, I do think that the skill set that I've picked up over the last 4 years on the Board of Finance, it does matter. It took a lot of time and a lot of effort. I think you guys know that it takes a lot of hours to kind of make it all hum. But in doing that, you'll learn a lot. You learn how the budgets work. You learn what matters, what doesn't matter. You have the relationships to kind of advance the ball. And I think it accrues to the benefit of the residents of Wilton to have somebody in there that knows how the job works and can be a steady hand. And then lastly, no, the last time I ran in 2021, I had a series of campaign promises, and the biggest of which was transparency and accountability. And I'm very proud that I think we achieved that objective. We do the budget surveys. I go on speaking circuits during the budget season to talk to folks in town. We have the newsletters. But similar to that, there's another objective that I have this time around, and that is the financial cliff in front of us. And I'm sure we're going to talk about it with the school buildings and the town infrastructure. I have already started the process of being able to address that. We're in the process of establishing a new fund called the Capital and Non-Recurring Expenditures Fund, which is called the Building Fund. I spearheaded the creation of that, and hopefully it'll get set up in the next few months. There's also setting up the bond schedule as well, and this takes years of planning and years of work. And my goal was to set up the process in place to pay for this, so that the issues that this generation is facing now, it ends with us, and then going forward, we can focus on other issues. So for all those reasons, that's why I'm running again.
Well, with the going forward, I'd like to get your sense of how we're going to move forward, given the current state of Wilton's finances. Can you kind of talk about what, from your perspective, Wilton's financial state is, and how, if you're elected again, how you're going to help, the Board of Finance deal with it?
Well, Wilton's financial state is excellent. I mean, there's a couple of different things we can discuss about things that have happened in town, but our balance sheet is top of the state, if not top of the country. I mean, you can look at the debt service percentages. I mean, we pay almost $10 million in debt service. That's about 7% of our budget. Best in class is less than 10%. So we're well exceeding there. We have growth in our grand list every year. Our budgets are properly funded every year. And so no, Wilton is on very strong financial footing. I think there are certain things we could talk about and what's going on with the town finance department, but in terms of Wilton's finances, we are extremely healthy. We have AAA bond rating, and we've been reaffirmed in that every single year, and there's really no headwinds there. So no, I'm very proud to say that Wilton is doing very well.
That said, is there a fear and possibilities that the situations that have been going on over the past year could impact that?
I mean, to start off with, as we think about I will say some of the personnel challenges that we're dealing with right now. I mean, it's not a good thing, right? It's not good to have to replace your CFO and have your controller leave, and that sits primarily with the Board of Selectmen and Town Hall. The Board of Finance, by statute, cannot get involved in that. I look at it as a positive, though. I think it's an opportunity for us to bring in some high level talent to help us steer the ship in the appropriate way. I am part of the CFO search committee. You guys did a great job reporting on what happened with our last CFO, and I was appointed to the committee to help find her successor. We have some great candidates and some that I can't say too much about it, but I'm very excited about people with great experience who will help Wilton. So again, nobody likes multiple departures all at once, but given some of the folks in front of us, I think it's an opportunity for Wilton to continue sprinting ahead.
I mean, in your last answer, you talked about, not too many headwinds. I've been curious as to whether or not all of the goings on is going to impact our Moody's rating. I mean, part of, what we hear that has gone into Moody's giving us such a high AAA rating is how smoothly everything functions and how great our staffing is. Yeah. But we did have the problem with the audit. We have had very high profile departures all at once that, gives some sense of management and process issues. Moody's isn't going to take a look at that and say, maybe we need to reconsider or take a closer look at things?
Well, as I think about the audit, look, I've you've heard me say it. I'm on the public record as expressing concern over the material weakness in the last audit, to the point where I wanted to, and we could talk about it, I wanted to establish the process review committee, because to your point, my opinion is issues don't just come out of nowhere. There's processes that lead to them. And I wanted to diagnose the exact processes, and not just in the finance department, but kind of across the board as well. And so we wanted to establish the process review committee. We think we might have had one meeting before the departure of our last CFO, so it never kind of hit the ground running. It is continuing, though. And our interim CFO is going to provide the Board of Finance, and I believe the Board of Selectmen, a report on what he sees and ways for us to up our game. But the direct answer to your question, I can't speak for Moody's. I'm not part of those conversations. That those meetings are had with the first select woman, with the CFO, and with the town administrator as well. But I wouldn't anticipate any issues right now, just given the strength of Wilton's balance sheet and Wilton's finances. Should those be impacted, sure, we'd have something to be worried about. But the issues right now are within some of the background processes, which we're focusing on fixing it in real time. And I anticipate that with some of these hires coming in the next few weeks and months, we'll be on the right track.
The process review committee is choosing an outside investigator to look in. Is that still what's going to be happening?
That would be my anticipation. So we haven't met again. And so I'm speaking purely for myself and not necessarily on behalf of the process.
Or what you'd like to see then. How about we talk about it that way as a candidate?
Yeah, sure. What I would like to see in terms of that is, like, as part of my day job, I run a private investment firm. I sit on boards. And one of the things that I've realized is I know what I know. I don't necessarily have the privilege of the experiences that other people have had. And there are best practices out there for all of this stuff. And so what I would like to see from the process review committee, and I believe others on there as well, let's bring in an outside firm that has seen a lot of municipalities. They know what good looks like, and let's learn from them. Let's bring them in. Let's see where are some ways that we can kind of up our game, and let's bring in some resources for us to do that. So that's what I would like to see happen. That was the intention when we first met earlier in August, whenever it was, and that would be my intention going forward as well.
You've been very visible this year, and I see you attending a lot of the Board of Selectmen meetings. Is that something that you expected in this role as chair? Is this typical in this role as chair? You're obviously running again, so I'm guessing you want to continue doing that, but I'm just curious about that involvement.
It's a good question. I think it gets the broader question of, as my wife likes to say, the time invested. So I'll start by saying, no, it's not what I expected when I ran 4 years ago. But the way I've approached it is like this is a volunteer gig. I'm not paid. I don't get vacation days. I don't get benefits. But I was elected to do a job. And my job is to look after specifically the finances, but more broadly, the well-being of the people of Wilton. And that's true of any Board of Finance member. I think it's doubly true as chair. And again, you guys do a fantastic job of reporting. I read it every day. But there's something about being in the meetings, especially when you're leading another board, to know exactly what's happening in those meetings and to hear it, and potentially maybe to jump in at the end and kind of share some of my perspectives as well, as the extent that it's helpful for them. And so, but the way I view this is, again, it's a volunteer gig. It's part-time to sometimes even a full-time job for me. And I embrace that. That's kind of that's what I'm running for. That's part of the role. And that's part of how you give back to the community that raised you. That's why I'm doing it.
If there's so much that's involved with the Board of Selectmen having to make decisions and planning around this, would your efforts be better spent running for the Board of Selectmen this year?
It's a good question, but so no, I don't think so. As I think about kind of the process review committee and some of the issues happening there, my focus is broadly right now finance and the finance. And one of the reasons on the process review committee, so the Board of Finance has within its mandate the ability to hire an auditor and follow up on audit issues. One thing is that I've seen is that typically speaking, these issues that we have in the audit, it's not just one issue, it's multiple things. And so if I want to kind of tackle the systemic causes, you need to partner with the Board of Selectmen. And so, I believe very much in collaboration and in partnership, both within my own board, but also with the other boards as well. And so we reached out in partnership to talk to the Board of Selectmen on that. The Board of Selectmen has a different role within the town, but my role is finances, and I'm proud that Wilton's finances are in a good state, and that's the role that I want to continue running for right now and continue doing. That said, the extent that I have ideas, I'm not, as you guys know, I'm not shy about sharing things that I'm seeing or things that I'm thinking, both to the Board of Selectmen and to our first select woman. But again, my focus is in the Board of Finance.
And actually, towards that end, I'm thinking you came up with this idea to revisit a quad board survey.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just share a little bit about that? Why is it important, and about the link between the different boards and commissions?
Yeah, it's a really good question. On the quad board survey, even broadly speaking, I think surveys are an important tool to poll residents about different things that they want to see in their community. So on the Board of Finance, our focus is on the tax and the finances. We poll people annually to see how they're feeling about the tax. I think it's been a very powerful tool for us. And I've been running that, myself, but personally doing it. There are other issues in town as well, right? There's development, there's different items at the schools, there's different items at the Board of Selectmen. And so I had reached out to the leadership of the Board of Selectmen, the leadership of the Board of Education, and leadership at Planning and Zoning to let's pull all of this together into one massive survey and ask people how they feel about it. Because ultimately, it's all correlated. Like development, for example, if you have more development in town, you have more tax revenue. Well, that's going to impact the budgets. Well, for impacting the budgets, that's going to impact the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen. So it's all circular at the end of the day. And I wanted to pull in the leadership of the other boards so that ultimately this doesn't just fall to the Board of Finance every year look at the budgets. It's part of one big master plan and one big vision for Wilton. And since I've become chairman, I've tried to lead my board, but also broadly speaking, Wilton, with one vision for what do we want to be when we grow up. And the survey, the quad board survey, is a tool for us to start that process. And there's been buy-in from all the boards, and our plan is to kind of kickstart that after the election.
So this is, running this time. How are you seeing the voters' attitudes? I mean, the P and Z in particular. I've heard a lot of comments about concerns about more public involvement and more, transparency, to use that word, et cetera, et cetera. What are you finding as you're sort of campaigning and taking the temperature of the town and the voters? Is it different than it was 4 years ago?
No, I mean, as I think about development, it's a really interesting question because the answer is I think it's been the same like since I've been growing up. And and what I mean by that is there's always a group of people that look, we moved here for a reason, right? And for almost all of us, right, it starts with the schools, but then there's also we like the town, right? It's idyllic, we love it here. And there's people that don't want to see that change. And then there's some people that do want to see some change and want to see some progress and change the downtown a bit. I think that's always been the case. I think now, look, there's that building behind the library, which I don't think it's controversial to say is not the most aesthetically pleasing of buildings. I certainly don't like the way it looks. I think that's bringing it up to people's forefront in terms of what this actually means. I think the vast majority of residents are in favor of, I would say, smart development. And that doesn't mean a big building behind the library. That means in places where it's less obtrusive on people's eyes. It helps the grand list. So I think most people kind of fall in the middle there, but there are people on both ends that want one or the other.
What are you finding that people are saying specific to Board of Finance concerns in terms of tax increases, how the budget's being handled, what's happening at town hall? What are voters telling you when you go door to door about those things?
So I've been doing quite a bit of door knocking, and I actually find it to be a lot of fun. You get to meet people, kind of hear their concerns, hear what they're thinking about. There's been a couple key themes that have come up. So I became chairman 2 years ago, and I think some people have noticed that the culture on the Board of Finance has shifted a little bit since I become chairman towards collaboration. One person had said that like it's a positive thing is we don't always agree on everything. We have different views in the Board of Finance, and we hash it out. We always have a unanimous vote afterwards because we agree in the spirit of compromise that we all want the same thing. We want the same end goal, which is the betterment of Wilton. We find a way to get there. So that's one that people have brought up. The second thing I think is people have also discussed related to that, the collaboration with our partner boards, the Board of Education, the Board of Selectmen. Historically, I would say the boards acted in isolation, and that's not a criticism. That's just that's kind of how the charter is set up. We each do our own thing. I don't necessarily like that, right? I tend to think of this: we are one government, trying to move forward. And we've got our different responsibilities. And so one of the things that I try to do when we could talk about the budget guidance process is let's start the conversation earlier so we can partner with those other boards and address their concerns and their needs. Then we can address our concerns and our needs. And so with the Board of Education, for example, right, they're starting their work earlier so that we can help them out and kind of share what we're thinking there and move it forward. I think people in Wilton have appreciated that we've gotten the tax results that they wanted while doing it in a way that is in collaboration with our friends and colleagues on the different boards. So that's a bit of what I'm hearing.
What would you like to see the Board of Finance doing differently? I mean, are you operating perfectly at this point? Is there something else you'd like to be doing better as a body?
I'm very proud of kind of how we're operating. When I became chair, my immediate concern was the tone at the Board of Finance, and it was an issue in the last election. You guys did a good job of kind of piecing that out, and I wanted to create a forum where people felt comfortable sharing what they thought and in any matter they chose, but feeling comfortable with doing that, but also having the freedom of movement to compromise as well. And I think we've done a good job there. I wanted to increase the transparency and the accountability on the Board of Finance. And ultimately, the tax money we spend, I mean, this is your money that we're spending. You all pay for this. And so I want to make sure people felt like they had the access to the Board of Finance. They knew what we were doing. And so that's why we did the surveys. Tell us what you think. That's why we do the newsletters. Like these are all the things that we discussed in that last meeting. And I like to hope a bite-sized chunk that you can digest and you can reach out to us. And again, to your comment, I am visible. I go out to the community. I go to the PTA meetings. I go to the Rotary Club in Kiwanis. And no, there are no gotcha questions. Ask me what I work for you. Ask me whatever you want, and I will tell you what I'm thinking and why I'm thinking it. And we can have a discussion about what we think makes sense. And those are some of the improvements we made. We are starting the process going forward of long-term planning. And so one of the beautiful things about municipalities is you have the ability to think in decades because of the bond schedules and because you can really kind of forecast certain things. And so what the Board of Finance is going to start shifting to doing, it should it be reelected, is towards those long-term forecasts. I think it's particularly important that we do that now, given some of the fiscal challenges in front of us. And again, they're surmountable, but it takes forethought. If we can lay the groundwork now and do that, the challenges we're facing, specifically with the building needs, they won't happen again. We're going to be able to think about them generations in advance. So when the issues come, we'll have the money kind of put aside to pay for them. And so we're starting that work right now. We started that in the past year. My goal is to continue that going forward.
I've actually heard people say that whole $150 million, group of projects was something of a myth. That it's not even, is an exaggeration.
I wish. I wish it were a myth. I think that, what's the exact dollar amount? It could be inflated. Then even taking a step back, so how did we get here? So the last administration, the last Board of Selectmen administration conducted, I think, 2 studies, one on the schools and one on the town buildings. And the math is a bit fuzzy, but I want to say the schools was like 136 million or something of work that need to be done. If you net out school reimbursement from the state, it was like 105 million or 101 million or something. On the town side, it was like $30 million. And then that's on top of existing work we have to do for our bridges. And that's how you got to I think it was like 213 million all in. I'm using precise numbers. Are the numbers actually that precise? I bet you bottom dollar no, right? They're going to come in different for a variety of reasons. I think that in many cases it depends how you do the math. Could they be inflated? Sure. Like as an example, one of the things they included on the schools was recurring maintenance that has to happen every 10 years. Well, is that really something that's broken? No, it's just work that we need to do. As I think about it, why that nuance, and it's an important nuance to discuss, but why it almost doesn't matter is it's still work we have to do at some point. And so we need to pay for it. And so where I sit on the finance board is I want to give the leaders on both of the other boards the financial mechanism to fund those should we need it. I don't want the decision to be, well, we'd love to do X, Y, and Z, but we can't afford it. Well, had we thought about 3 years ago, we could have afforded it. And so my plan is we're going to set aside funds and plans in place so that we can tackle those challenges. And whether the math is 150 or 200, we will know in advance and have the mechanism in place to pay for it, to do the work that we need to do.
kind of to talk about the Board of Ed. Is the Board of Finance hard enough on the Board of Ed year after year in terms of, increases, allowance? Yes, I understand it's one of the top school systems in the country. Couldn't they be number two and try a little harder? And is it a big difference to go from a 19 per student class size to 20? Is it really going to be, but we're talking about potentially savings of millions of dollars. It seems very automatic, as some people have said. It's an automatic that the all the contracts are going to be increased. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think I don't, not to speak for them, but if you were to ask the Board of Ed and the school administration, they would say I'm a little too hard on them, as well as the rest of the Board of Finance. I think this gets to a couple different issues. So the direct answer is like the Board of Finance has, whether it's been during the budget guidance process or during the actual budget vote in April, we have reduced the requested. We've always increased the budget. We've reduced the requested increases every year since I've been on the board. In the last 2 years, we've done it in partnership with the Board of Ed. So my first 2 years in office, there was that level of partnership, but it was, the process was just different. The way we do things now is it's not April 1st and hey guys, we're going to come in there and we're going to impose what we think is the right budget on you. We do it with the administration well in advance, and so it doesn't create that level of disharmony that you might have felt beforehand. But we're still very much making sure there's the right balance between what the taxpayers are paying and what the schools are getting. Now, with regards to the nuances of what's specifically in the Board of Ed budget, I've had a bit of an evolution on this personally. I have my views about certain things in the budget. The charter, actually, that's not the charter. Connecticut state statute says that the Board of Finance has no role. And as I've reflected on that, like I genuinely think that's a good thing, right? Because I'm not an educator. I am my colleagues, not educators. And you don't right, you don't want the financiers necessarily running things. You want the educators that understand how to educate these kids doing things. Now, there needs to be a partnership involved, right? Because if your taxes get too high, well, one, your residents are paying more, and two, that's going to increase property values. So there needs to be a partnership. But ultimately, you want both boards in their lane. And over the last 2 years of my chairmanship and 4 years in the Board of Finance, I think we've established that partnership to be able to do that.
We've had some people that we've interviewed suggest that Wilton's an affluent town. And in a lot of respects, we've kind of penny pinched in a lot of places. Whether that is in an infrastructure or considering spending on amenities or things to do to attract more economic development here. What would you say if, sitting at the debate table or, do you think that Wilton, should open up the wallet a little bit more to make things, so that employees at town hall don't have to sit in a coat every year in the winter, or, to make it something that we can really be proud of when the rest of the world looks at us?
To me, that's a question about return. What's the return on investment that we want? And return on investment is not necessarily a financial metric, right? It could be aesthetic, like we want a town hall where the pillar isn't falling over, right? And those are things that, like, yes, I think we should have a town hall and a town in general that we can be proud of. And that's why I'm thinking through this long-term plan, because ultimately all of this comes back to finances and how do we pay for it. I also have a role on I forget the building committee, the capital planning committee, I think it's actually called. And as part of that, we're going through the different projects to prioritize what it is that we want to see in our town and what work we want to do. And so my role is twofold. It's one, setting up the plan and the process in place to make sure that when we come up with those priorities, we can pay for it without, I hope, any hit, but a substantial hit to the taxpayers at a minimum, but also prioritize the things we want. So I think, yes, my answer is there are certain things. I do think that Wilton should invest in its infrastructure and should invest in certain things, but we should do it in a way that doesn't challenge the mill rate or the taxes.
Based on what's happened over the last year, does this town need some whole-scale changes, maybe like charter revisions? In particular, I'm thinking about comments I've heard about, the three top, I get maybe top salaried or certainly CFO, town administrator, first select person. Um, and also, I'm struck by, I guess, some issues with legal, but that's kind of maybe that's another sort of aspect to get into. But are there some real big broad changes that would benefit the town at this point, in your opinion?
I think holistically, as I think about charter reform, and it's been spoken about publicly. It was spoken at a public comment at the Board of Finance recently. It was spoken, I think, at the Board of Selectmen before that. Um, to start with, and I'll answer the question directly. To start with, I think Wilton's form of government is really cool. I mean, we get the opportunity to vote on our budgets. I'm not sure if it's unique to New England, but to my knowledge, it's the New England states that do that. And there's something that's very powerful about that. We get to elect me, right? The people that help present the budgets, and you get to elect the first select woman or the first selectman who oversees the town hall. I think what we're seeing so I wouldn't recommend changes to that. I think that is democracy in action definitionally, and I'm proud of that. I think what we've seen over the last few years, and reflecting on comments I've heard the previous first select woman make, and even our current first select woman, the job of first selectman, broadly speaking, has grown substantially. That is my understanding, is it's why they wanted to hire the town administrator. Um, as I kind of sit back and think about it, I think the town admin role is a good one. I think it's helpful to have people with subject matter expertise to help a layman who may be elected to that office. The CFO, I think there's probably a good question is, do we need a full-time CFO, or we need a full-time person? Do we need a CFO, or do we need like a director of finance? And that's depending on the skill set of the town administrator. I think that's a reasonable conversation to have. That individual is a partner to the board of finance, specifically to the chairman. I've had to do a lot of that work, specifically over the last few months, but even before that as well. So I'd say Wilton is still evolving in terms of what the right infrastructure we need is, but I think we're taking the appropriate steps right now for where we are.
And in terms of whole scale changes, again, I know that the Board of Finance brought up the issue of looking into getting its own legal counsel. There's some matters. I know I remember the library, some stuff
Yeah.
related to the library. Most recently, the board had major disagreement with what I'm going to put in the hands of the town attorney writing of the Ambler lease. At what point, again, I don't know if this is something that has to go to the charter. At what point does the town need to get really sort of serious about looking at maybe how its legal counsel's arranged? Do you have concerns about, open-ended question?
I mean, as I think about legal counsel, just to start off with, this is outside of the Board of Finance. So the Board of Selectmen picks our town's council. They vote on that. So it's not just the first select woman. It's the Board of Selectmen that votes on it. And so this is on their prerogative, and that is their choice to pick. I think there's an interesting dynamic at play where the town council represents the entire town, right? But in many cases, they report back to one person, and that would be the person, the first selectman's office. I think that's an interesting thing to think about, right? Because there have been issues where there've been kind of disagreements among the different boards, and the town council has weighed in ways that I am on record with disagreeing with. But ultimately, it's the Board of Selectmen to make the decision whether that's appropriate or inappropriate. The Board of Finance has considered in the past, maybe it's probably this time last year, maybe a little bit, maybe in January, about bringing in our own counsel. The short answer is it is very difficult for us to do that. For us to do that, every contract that passes through the town has to be signed by the Board of Selectmen. So should the Board of Finance want to do that, we would need to get the Board of Selectmen's approval. And we haven't sought that at this point.
Last year's budget process, especially on the town side, was a lot more difficult than we've seen in the past. What are you going to do differently this year to try and get, reliable numbers and help the process go a little bit smoother?
Yeah, the Board of Selectmen process wasn't exactly smooth sailing. And we're starting the budget guidance process now, and so we're doing it in real time, and it's rocky, right? We have an interim CFO. We just hired a controller. We talked before about I'm spending a lot of time doing this, and one of the things I'm doing now is I'm personally rolling up my sleeves and helping them to the best of my ability. Last year the budget that the Board of Finance was given, it did have some errors in it. I went through it personally and I found those errors and I saved the taxpayers over $1 million in finding it. My goal is to not have that happen again, to catch it beforehand. So right now, I'm helping them. I'm rolling up my sleeves and helping them do that. I think part of what I would like to see, and I want to be very careful here, right? This is the Board of Selectmen's process. It's for them to do as they want to, and I'm simply a friend and a colleague that wants to help them do it. I think I'd like to see us get into a cadence. And I would credit the Board of Education with having that cadence. They start their budget process much earlier. And so one of the things that I would recommend to that board and to the first select woman is let's find ways to automate some of these processes. And so when it comes to budgets, we know what the key levers are, and we can just make assumptions on those levers to create accurate forecasts.
How much purview does the Board of Finance have with the CFO and the finance department? I mean, you would think that there's some kind of shared responsibility given the kind of numbers and factors that you have to consider. Do you have in the way you talk about the Board of Selectmen having so much purview over other things, legal, contractual, other things, how much can you take over a bit in terms of the finance department and financial matters?
As it comes to the finance department and the personnel, the direct legal answer is we have no purview. That entirely sits with the Board of Selectmen. Now, that said, we're all friends and colleagues on the different boards. So I was invited to join the CFO search committee, as was Sandy Arkell on my board as well, who's doing a great job. So there are ways that we can share the experiences we have to help drive it forward. My big focus is making sure that we talk about Wilton's finances, and I'm proud to say they're very healthy, that they stay that way. And so I tend to ask for a lot of data, and my board is a very analysis heavy board and a very data driven board. And there's not guesswork on my board. We don't put our finger in the air and do that. We very much go into the weeds. And so I do request that data. And a lot of the times I'll do the work myself just to make sure it fully makes sense to me and I fully get it. So that's how the Board of Finance tends to get involved. It's on the number side with the data that we receive. It's not so much the match and the personnel because that's not our purview. But I tend to look at it. I take the powers that I do have, or as a member of the Board of Finance that I have, and I make sure that I can influence what's in my purview to influence.
What happens if the data doesn't come? For instance, the actuals, and you don't even have to answer that. I just was thinking that. I do want to ask.
Well, look, I'm the chair of the board, and I have a responsibility. I have a fiduciary obligation to the people of Wilton. I have an ethical and a moral obligation to Wilton. I mean that very seriously. And so part of that is making sure that I get the data that I need, and the Board of Finance gets the data that it needs, whether it's budget guidance or whether it's budget to actuals. The charter gives us the ability to request information. That is a different word than ask, right? It does need to be supplied. And luckily, we have not encountered a situation where that has been withheld for us, and I don't anticipate that happening.
The tax sale.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's an interesting idea. I was surprised to see some of the numbers there. Again, this is outside of the Board of Finance. So the only way it can impact the Board of Finance is if there was a cost to Wilton. And in this case, I want to be clear, there is no cost to Wilton here. Whatever the number on the tax rolls are, that's the number that we get back. Any cost of the tax sale is borne by the person buying it. So this is very much outside of the Board of Finance. Now, as a resident of Wilton, I would say first and foremost, I think it needs to be handled carefully, right? These are our friends and our neighbors. And I think we should try really hard to try and collect the money that the people of Wilton are owed without doing this. But to the extent there's money outstanding, then I think this is an elegant way for us to collect certain back taxes. And there's an obligation, I think, on behalf of the current residents to make sure that everyone's paying their fair share. But it should be handled very carefully.
How important is electing you in relation to the, to use the word, the crisis in town hall?
I mean, so as I think about my own candidacy, I think there are certain unique traits that I bring to the table. One is, and I think I mentioned a lot of it before, but it's I'm from Wilton, right? And so as we think about the different issues in front of us, again, I'm young, right? I'm 35, but I have been here for a long time. And I did choose to come back here, and there's a reason why I picked to come back here. It's because I love this place, and so I bring that perspective. Second is, I think as we think about the different issues in front of us, right? A steady pair of hands at the helm, that is critical. It's equally critical that we have someone that knows how to do the job, right? And especially that this role of chairman, right? You do need to know how, right? We talked a bit about the things that the Board of Finance is allowed to do and not allowed to do and influence certain things. You need to know how the charter works. You need to know what's in your purview. You need to know the different levers, whether it's how to do budget guidance. I mean, I'm really forecasting the debt service right now for the town, right? Yeah, I can do that. Can other people do that? I don't know. People can learn it, but I'm personally doing it, right? We talked about transparency and accountability. Well, to me, these aren't just words. I go out of my way to make sure we can make this a reality. I personally do the survey. I wrote the survey. I coded. I cut it. It's unanimously voted on by the Board of Finance. So it is our survey, but I'm the person that's putting it into action. And so I think that with the unique traits that I bring are, it's a doer. I'm going to roll up my sleeves. I'm going to get the job done. I'm going to bring my perspective as a long-term resident, and I'm going to do what I can to, as I've proven in the past, I will create balance. I believe in fiscal discipline. I've made sure that our budgets do have that embedded, but I'm going to do it in a way that is in partnership and collaboration, because I think that's better for Wilton, that people feel proud about their government. And so that's what I bring to the table.
Have you ever given any thought to running for the first selectman job?
No, that's not on my that is not on my plate. My day job, I run a private investment firm. Like I'm the leader of the firm, and so that job is a full-time job, and it takes a lot of dedication. That is not on my horizon right now, at least for the near term.
Something that I think we did miss, I just want to go back and make sure we touch on it, because one of the big things that did happen with the Board of Finance this year is how the Board of Finance stepped in as part of that Ambler Farm lease process. And we touched on it a bit in one question, but I want to be specific to that. The impression for some people might be that, Ambler Farm plays such an important part and role in Wilton's history, in the amenity it provides to residents, in the way it brings people from out of town. And some people felt as if the Board of Finance might not have been as respectful to that part of, Ambler Farms, the role that they play in the town. In addition, and I think that this was felt by a lot of the people at Friends of Ambler Farm, the relationship between the Friends of Ambler Farm and the town is different than, let's say, the Wilton Garden Club that is helping with the Old Town Hall and other organizations, Trackside, for instance, that they are acting as agents of the town. And if you didn't have them, what would the town do, with this property that it suddenly had to take care of? How do you answer that? Or, how do you respond and feel about those kinds of criticism?
All criticism, yeah, I want to hear, right? These are people in town. Everyone has their thoughts. It's important for people to feel free to express whatever it is they're feeling. I love Ambler Farm, right? I think it's a tremendous amenity for the people of Wilton. I go there, right? My wife and I love the Apple side of there. It's a great benefit for Wilton. When the Board of Finance weighed in, and we can get very technical on the lease, we weren't weighing in on Ambler Farm. We were weighing in on the lease. I am a big supporter of Ambler Farm. I voted in favor of the bond project on a personal level, right? That was recently passed. I had some issues from Board of Finance perspective, but personally, I wanted to see it done, and I'm glad that it passed. That said, the initial draft, taking a step back, the Board of Finance, it's a great role. It's a great position. Sometimes you need to look at things in a way that isn't the most fun. And so I am simultaneously a big supporter of Ambler Farm and supporting them from a municipal perspective, but also believe in strong fiscal governance as well. And those two things, they're never in conflict, but sometimes they rub up against each other. I think this is an example of that. The first lease that was sent to us it quite literally violated Connecticut general statutes. You cannot encumber future boards. You cannot tell the Board of Finance that you have to spend this. The only way you can do that is debt service. And even then, we still vote on debt service, right? And the lease that was initially presented did not have that. It was an automatic pass. And so that was issue number one that we needed to deal with. And my understanding, I have not seen a really recent draft release since I spoke to the Board of Selectmen in, when was it, April, May? So my assumption is that's been dealt with. Second, I believe in the power of democracy. I mean that sincerely, and that I'm a big supporter. I think we should support this, but we should give the future generations the ability to weigh in on this. 100-year lease is a really long time from now. And I wanted to look, I'm in favor of having extensions and things like that, giving the entity the right protection they have to do the right, to look after the farm. But there needed to be the ability for elected leaders generations from now to weigh in. And those were the two biggest things. And I have, I think it was like 17 points that I kind of went through, like in the nitty gritty, in the details. But that was basically it. At no point did I or anybody in the Board of Finance weigh in on against the farm. In fact, we went out of our way to say we're big proponents of the farm. We're supporters. Some of us donate to it. I'm on the mailing list. We got all this stuff. But we do need to make sure that the contracts that Wilton signs us up into, again, this isn't sexy to say, it's not based on emotion, right? It's got to be based on sound government. And on the basis of sound government, we can do great things, but we need to make sure the governance is in place. So I'm a big supporter of Ambler Farm. I'm a big supporter of strong governance. And when the Board of Finance weighed in, and when I weighed in, it was with those two concepts in mind. And ultimately, it's better for the farm if it's based on town governance, based on sound governance, because then it can't be challenged in the future as well.
I heard a candidate make a comment about selling off town properties as a way to raise revenue for the town, and kind of like with an eye-rolling smirk that that's not really a great practice. Now you're serving on the committee, the WC planning. Capital.
Yeah.
I know I always have
the building committee.
The building committee. And obviously you've been, looking into selling off some of the properties, and you seem to be in favor of some of that. What's your thought on that? I mean, is this a good practice? Is this where people should be, where the town should be looking for revenue?
So the answer is, I think it's something that we should consider, and it could be a good practice. Broadly speaking, we can raise revenue this way. I am in favor of it. It is not to raise revenue though. Like that is a very positive benefit of it, but it's not the key reason. The buildings that we are talking about potentially divesting, I mean, I don't think anybody in town hall or on the building committee, or maybe even in town, knows how we got some. We literally own houses like across town. I don't know how we got those houses. I would make the comment that if you look at the state of some of those houses, our town government is not the best at being stewards of those properties. And so then it leads to the question, well, why should we continue to be in the business of owning them? And the last question is, okay, well, if we're going to continue owning them, it's going to cost us a lot to fix them. And so as I think about whether we should hold on to them or not, I am in favor of spending money is like putting gas in a car, right? You need to put the gas in to make it go. But if you've been too much overflows, we need to make sure we're spending it in the right ways. I think there are better ways to spend it than on buildings, which a private third party can do a better job being a steward of, right? That's not to say we should sell our town hall, right? There are certain things that you can't sell. But there are houses out there that, again, I'm not even sure how we own them, that I'm just not sure that it's in the Wilton taxpayers' best interests that we continue to own these properties. And it may be in our best interest to sell them to get revenue. So I'm in favor of it, not necessarily for the revenue reasons, but more than that, it's creating a headwind for us.
What's your 30-second elevator pitch for why the voters of Wilton should elect you to the Board of Finance?
Sure. Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I would encourage people to vote for me and ask for your vote. I am a resident of Wilton. I am a son of Wilton. I grew up here off Mountain Road. I'm the incumbent chair of the Board of Finance. And over the last couple of years during my tenure, we've increased transparency, we've increased accountability, and we increased the harmony and collaboration across the board as well. And then lastly, I'd ask for your continued support going forward because Wilton does have challenges in front of us. And based on the skill set that I've picked up over the last few years and the time that I've invested into this board, I would ask for 4 more years to finish the job and put Wilton to continue its strong financial path.
Okay. Matt, thank you.
Thank you very much.